Why I started studying history. So, ever since I was a child, I used to get good grades in history because I used to read it like a story. But even though I got good marks, I never really liked history. I felt that it was kind of boring and that why should I read about old people and why does it matter to know about the past? Recently, I was watching a Charlie Morgan video, and which he told to that we should give more priority to the old age books rather than the new ones. Now, he also said that he doesn't mean that the new age books are bad. He just meant that if we are reading history, we can read about the people like one in a billion, like Napoleon, Caesar, Alexander the Great, Pompey, Socrates, Sophocles, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca. Like we can read about all these great people. That means that if we read about great people, we would come to know something. And what that something is, that how they view the world. They don't view the world simply like we do. Do you really think that Einstein had the same perspective as ours? Like, how can anyone think that? So, fuck. So, how can you start reading history? You can start by just reading the biographies of some great people. I'm reading some, I will tell you the list of the book. I will recommend some books at the end of the video and you can study them. Now, let me tell you that why. In Meditations, Marcus Aurelius says that there is a cycle of 40 years and the cycle repeats. It's the same after every 40 years and the cycle repeats and the cycle repeats. So if someone has studied the past, they know that what could happen in the future. If you know the past, you can predict to a very high degree what the future can be. Because just think about it. If you know certain patterns about your childhood, that you were traumatized or you were kidnapped as a kid and now you have some pain and you don't believe, you can connect the dots if you are really smart, which I am not, and I am not able to connect the dots. But if you really think about it, you can connect the dots. And how you are able to connect the dots? By referring to your past. You are able to predict your action in the future. So do you not really think that you could predict the stock market by studying the stock market of the past? You could not predict how the war will affect by studying the past two wars like the World War I, World War II, Roman Empire war and all that. So the first great idea which we can develop is that it gives us a perspective to look into the future with a greater probability to succeed. Now the second thing is that if we like study great people, we do get to know what are their view of the world. I am telling my point once again, but I want to further explain on that. Like for example, do you really think like Napoleon had the same view like you, like us? Like in our generation, people are always told to be humble and be gratitude for what we have. Like for example, in life, what do you think what's the most important thing? Many of us would say that to feel happy is the most important thing in life. Whenever I touch my mother's feet, she would always say, "Khush raho," which means that be happy, stay happy. But Napoleon and Caesar, they never thought of being happy. They didn't even care about it. They wanted to achieve something. They wanted to conquer the world. Plus, like most people nowadays think that narcissism is bad. But they had a great level of narcissism. They had a very huge superiority complex, meaning that they were born for something much bigger. They were born for something much greater in life. They were not born to lead a normal life. That's what we get to know when we study them. And we can study them because there are books, there are autobiographies which display what the letters they wrote at that time, and how they were thinking, how they were winning, what strategies were they using, what kind of mindset they had. And the third point which I'm trying to make is that we can study what these people did, what the great things they did, but we can also study that whatever in which they failed, what was their mistake. Like for example, what our mistake is, that we stay up late, we eat unhealthy, we don't do our work. But do you really think that these people had the same kind of mistakes which we have? I don't think so. Like, these people had mistakes which are far beyond our imagination, and if we study them, we can kind of get an idea of things which we could in which we could do mistake in the future, and we could potentially save ourselves from the trouble by learning that lesson through that book. Like for example, Napoleon, I fucking don't know any example, to be very honest, because I am still studying. I have, like for example, if you start a book, if you start a really detailed book of, for example, Napoleon, like I have started, it consists of around 400 pages, so it will take time. So I don't really have an example for this point, but you can really get the point, you know. So now I will give you some, practical books which you can read. Like I am reading this one, Emil Ludwig, Napoleon. Next, you can read Letters from a Stoic by Seneca. You can also read Discourses by Epictetus. It's a really great book. Next, you can read The Origin of Species by Charles Darwin. And to tell you the truth, I didn't really understood it. I tried to read this book, but I did not understand it at that moment. And because I don't think that I was articulate enough or kind of had the level of brain power to understand the words of bloody Charles Darwin. But it's a great book, I know that, and I will read it in the future, so I'm recommending it. Next, you can also read, like this is a very short autobiography of Alexander the Great. And the last book, and I think it's the best book to be very honest, is Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. These are the books you can start with if you really want to study history in the form of books. You can also watch videos like on YouTube. There are really good documentaries about Napoleon, Caesar, Genghis Khan, Alexander the Great. What did Einstein find about what was his black hole theory and all that. It's really great. And you can learn a lot. Like just today I was studying. I was not really studying, I was just passively watching the video on the Greek mythology. And it told me a lot, like from where the word hygiene came from, how was the word Athens, how was the city of Rome Athens, how was the city of Rome named Athens, like all these things we don't really know, but these came from Greek mythology. Although I thought that it was kind of foo stuff because no one really cares that the gods exist and this that, but it gives you a kind of, it's funny because I used to watch anime, and in anime there are superpowers, and that the 7-year-old kid is intelligent than the chess master, but it doesn't really happen, right? But it still makes you kind of happy, and because you kind of imagine yourself in his shoes and getting the same feeling that he is feeling at that moment. So I was just trying to feel that feeling, to be very honest. But there are really good documentaries on Cleopatra, like the woman who had an affair with Caesar, and thus she was able to rule over him, and she was able to ally the Egypt with the Roman and gain control over Rome for a very good extensive period of time. And after Caesar died, she became the lover of Mark Antony, the kind of the right hand man of Caesar. So it's really interesting, how she framed her whole, how she seduced the right kind of people at the right moment, and fuck. So yeah, that's what I'm trying to convey to you, that you should read a lot and you should take a lot of knowledge, because knowledge is power. Knowledge is the fucking power. And if you know a lot, you can be seen as smarter. You would have much more experiences. You would be better in vocabulary. You would be able to frame your sentences in a better way. You would recognize a lot of patterns. You would be able to see the mistakes in which you can fail. You would be able to predict the future to a degree. There are a lot of things which you can get from reading history. And if you really think that it's boring, just give it a try. Don't read one of those textbooks which we used to read in school, which is the filtered history. Read books like these, which I just told about. Like, these books are really great and they will give you a new perspective on life. They will tell you that how humans can live correctly. Like stoic books like these. So yeah, that's it for the video. Thank you. Take care. Bye bye.